if I think about my executive training, it really started with Union Bank of Switzerland and Microsoft as the two sort of blue chips that really formed the structure of my sort of business behavior. And working with Microsoft, very large, very successful, very dominant enterprise business. The real focus that we had was about being a category captain, right? So being really honest about your competition, be very clear about where they're successful and where they're not. And if you talk to that, you actually create a lot more support and commitment to you because people understand that you're telling the truth. So, for example, I compete with Australia Post today. I will tell you that their mobile app is the best in the business.
Uh-huh.
It is simply, it is. I think it's near flawless in comparison to what else is in the market. And I tell people that, and they're surprised that I would say that they're the competition. Well, my view is I now need to build an app that's better than that.
Yeah.
Um, and the way to do that is to be really honest about the fact that they've got some great technology, right? Um, and I really took that from my days in enterprise. Then I would say when I started this company as a small business, I operated with a small business mentality. And I
Uh-huh.
think when you operate in a small business mentality, everything is about partnerships because I was always smaller than everybody that I was engaging with. So all of my customers and clients are far bigger than Hub. So we came from this position of what I'd call respectful subservience, right? Where, um, thank you very much for the opportunity, DHL. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And with that category captaincy sort of mindset, you build a degree of trust with these much larger organizations than you, right? And that helped me, I believe, and the team grow the business. And then there was the internal attitude about being humble and respectful. Because I generally think most people are good, and they want to work with good people. And so if we operate in that way, we're very transparent, we operate with a category captaincy attitude. I think those are the things that have helped. Now, I actually am in the non-profit area. I'm a director for a company called Connecting Communities, for a not-for-profit called Connecting Communities Australia, which
Okay.
actually supports regional and rural resilience with communities, typically around disasters, flood and fire damage and what have you, and sending
Yeah.
people in. And my attitude on that board was exactly the same. Everybody that we're asking for support from is bigger than us. So the first thing to do is not sit down there and bag the other organizations who do provide similar services. Talk to their strengths and be honest about our weaknesses against them and talk about our differences to them. And what that does is that puts you in a position where you're sort of you do no harm in that, well, I'm happy to work with you, or I'm not happy to work with you, or sometime in the future you may even be collaborating with one of those so-called competitors for that charitable dollar. And I think that attitude has permeated through everything I've done, which is sort of accept that you're small, everybody that you're working with is larger. Come with that proposition in mind, be a category captain. It makes it easier for them to want to work with you.
Yeah, great. Um, in the commercial world, there's a financial driver, right? A partnership is there to generate returns to both partners, and if it's not doing that, it fails or fails to launch. In the nonprofit sector, obviously, you don't get the same financial returns to directors or even staff. So there are different drivers to partnerships. So, given that you also wear a nonprofit hat, what do you think those drivers should be, and where they fall short in terms of structuring effective partnerships where both parties win?
I think about that in the analogy I use is leaders are people that other people want to follow, and managers tend to be other people are made to follow, right?
Yeah,
And and so if you come onto a board or you're in a not-for-profit organization like the one that we've been in, I've seen all versions of why people want to be a part of it. I've had people on our boards who had public sector backgrounds
yeah,
who wanted to be on the board because it was good for their resume for the next thing that they wanted to do,
Okay.
right? I've also worked with people who want to be in a not-for-profit because they've got lots of idle time because they've retired or stepped back, and they're looking for something to do, right? Um, I've seen people who want to be a part of the organization because they've had experience on the other side as the funder versus the person trying to solicit funds to do the work. Not one of those things are wrong, as long as in my mind, they understand that the organization and the objectives of the organization are the most important thing. You're allowed to have both motivations. So I have no problem with somebody wanting to be a part uh, of of the charity, and they've got a set of alternate objectives for themselves,
Yeah.
as long as the core tenet of what the um, organization is for is being managed. And the reason that's important, Alex, is because I've seen it where they actually forget about all the tenets of what the business is, what the organization is trying to do. They're so focused on their own agenda. And I think it's actually similar to business. People, I want to be a manager. Why do you want to be a manager? Well, there's more money in it. Yeah, but do you want to be a manager because you care about the activity of managing people? Well, that's something I have to do to be a manager, I suppose. Um,
Yeah.
well, you don't make them managers. So I look at it like that. What's the motivation? You're allowed to have more than one motivation. You just cannot disrespect the core motivation. It's my view.
Okay, love that. So a lot of the work I do is to help directors, and uses directors more so
Yeah.
than CEOs, remember why they got into this, why they took off on a voluntary role, to help them get past ego and fear, which often are the things that get in the way of sensible partnerships, or even the other end of the far end of the spectrum, mergers. But there is certainly a lot of emotion tied up with organizational history, brand, particularly when a founder's involved. Do you see that play out in the
Yeah.
nonprofits you've been involved in, or are there
Yep.
equivalents in the commercial sector? And if so, how do you find you can get past them?
I fundamentally think there is no difference between the commercial sector and the charitable sector when you have a founder.
Okay.
I don't think there's any different. I'm a founder of my company, and I work with I was a founder of a charity with somebody else, Connecting Communities Australia, and we both go through exactly the same pain, right? It's like a rock band coming to terms with maybe we've come to the end. And it's time for somebody else to play, right? And we all go through it because number one, we're all suffering from imposter syndrome.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not sure if we should be, we are the right person, but we also think nobody else can do it. Number two, we love it. It's our baby, and we struggle with the idea of letting go. And number three, we find it very easy not to listen to other people who may want to give us some advice.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I think I've been going through this quite recently. I think maybe it's time, or the time is in the next couple of windows. And I think the problem is that we really enjoy it. If we've been doing it for the right reasons, we want to see the success and we want to enjoy the success. Alex, there's a curve I like to think about, right, that I talk to people about, and even in my own business. When you start a business, unless you're incredibly fortunate, it's hard, right? It's all the things and then a charity is no different, right? It's all the things you didn't know about. It's all the things that you didn't think about. It's all the things that you have to do that you took for granted in the past. I remember when I started my company, I asked why there was no paper in the photocopy, and somebody said, well, because you haven't gone to office work to buy any. I thought, oh, that's my job. All right. Okay, that's my job too. And it's the same with a charity. It's all the things, somebody may be really energized by the operational aspects and are not interested in the administrative aspects. Somebody might be more interested in the administration side and doesn't care about the actual operation of the charity. And so it's the bits you don't know. And so it's just really hard. And you go through this period where everything's just hard. And then it starts to come good. And what you say to yourself is, I want to really be there to enjoy the good bit, right? I just want to be there because, and I deserve to be there because I did the hard bit. And so I've got this view, and I don't think it's any different to a charity. I say to people, a founder may not be the best person to run a stable organization
Yeah,
that's got mid to low single to low double digit growth.
yeah, yeah.
The founder may be the right person to do the swashbuckling and getting everything going and taking all the risks and doing all of that.
Turn zero into one. Yeah,
Yep,
100%.
correct. But then when it's a nice steady state organization, they may not be the right person, and they need to be honest with themselves about that, right? And I think a lot of founders struggle with that, and they create justifications because in their heart they just love being there and they love being a part of it because they were there through the tough times and they want to enjoy the better times. And
Yeah.
that's in my mind. I feel like I'm having a therapy session now because in my mind that is a reflection that people need to have with themselves, and they need to be honest and be open to getting advice from others who might say, "Look,
It's time.
time."
Yeah, change of a chapter. I get it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So moving on from the founder syndrome to leadership in established organizations. There was something you said earlier that we, as leaders, we should find time to enjoy the good bit. Um,
yeah,
I would question how many non-profit leaders are ever sitting back going, "Oh,
yeah, yeah.
enjoying
True,
the sunny
true,
upland," right?
true.
And part of that's because managing non-profits, I think, is harder than running commercial businesses in several ways.
Yeah,
There's an expectation. There are different sets of expectations. Non-profits shouldn't invest in overhead. All the money should go directly to service.
that's right.
Our revenue models are often not tied to the delivery of the work we do, right? So there's a mismatch there. And so it's a really challenging environment to manage. Even successful organizations, you always have to keep working on them. I don't think there are ever sunny uplands. I believe partnerships and collaborations can be accelerators to deliver social impact in the same way that they can be accelerators to deliver profit for commercial businesses. However, there is still a stigma attached to collaborations and particularly mergers in the nonprofit sector because people believe because they are good and smart that they can solve social issues themselves. And so needing to work with someone else, or even at the extreme end of the spectrum, kind of merging your organization with another aligned organization because bigger might be better, or you get efficiencies, do more together than you could separately. It still has a stigma of failure. Is there an equivalent in the commercial world? Because if there is, I think there's a really good lesson for organizations to learn about collaborations being a positive step. And the second part to that is, because there is still a stigma attached to collaborations, often they're not explored until an organization has demonstrated it is not sustainable and it's not delivering the social impact it was set up to do. And so, those conversations are left until the 11th hour, which usually it's too late to structure any sort of meaningful partnership. So I guess two things. Is there a learning from the commercial world around the proactive, positive nature of collaborations that you think charities can learn from? And secondly, how can we get them to consider that earlier in the cycle rather than as a last gasp alternative to, winding down in a year because you're running out of cash?
So I do think there's a synergy, and as I said, because I'm in a commercial organization and a charity, I've actually seen exactly what you're discussing, and my view is I agree with you. I agree with everything that you've just said about collaboration. The issue is not the collaboration itself. The issue is people's propensity to and appetite for relinquishing any degree of control. Right? That's what I think the issue is. I think
Yeah.
in business I've tried to um, you know work with companies in the past in a collaborative manner, but they're so busy thinking about what does that mean, who controls what, who makes the decision where, that it hasn't worked out. And in charities, I think sometimes, especially in charities, um, uh, a lot of time there's not the right economy of scale because there's 25 different organizations trying to offer the same service. And
Yeah.
if you bring back and look at, well, your strength is this and your strength is that. So I'll give an example without bringing up any names. I think my company Hub is very good at engaging with logistics carriers and building technology.
Okay.
I think there was an industry partner and there was an industry player who was very good at engaging with retailers. They had a pure core competency in that area that we didn't have.
Uh-huh.
I thought the combination of those two companies would be incredibly powerful because now we'd have a great network, great logistics infrastructure, and great knowledge about retail. But we couldn't make that happen in a collaborative manner. And it only eventually happened via acquisition when we
Yeah.
purchased that company. But the offer to collaborate existed. The charitable business around disaster recovery and the rest of it. The analogy I'll give is there'll be a bushfire in a community.
Yeah.
It will be on the news. The Red Cross will go in, these guys will go in, those guys will go in. 2 weeks later, everyone's gone, but all of the issues are still sitting there, and that community is still dealing with those problems and those concerns.
Uh-huh.
Now, Connecting Communities Australia, that's when they come in, when the noise has died down and the community's still cleaning up,
Yeah.
and we send in volunteers. The collaboration there is, look, we have a really strong competency post-disaster.
Uh-huh.
You have a great competency during the disaster. Wouldn't it be great if we came together and provided an end-to-end solution? And wouldn't that be an easier way for us to support funding and actually make that funding more efficient, more effective for that community? Right now, I genuinely, sincerely believe that makes sense. For that to work, two organizations need to accept that the way it's managed and the way that we control things has to change.
Uh-huh. So there has to be compromise, some level of give and take, and
Absolutely.
effective collaboration. Yeah.
And you're right, Alex. What happens is people find reasons why not to do that until it's too late. And then there's this mad, desperate scramble. And you know what? It looks like a mad, desperate scramble. And maybe what we should do is be really proactive up front and say, hey, look, this is our competency area here. This is what we're good at. As a category captain, I can honestly say you're great at those things, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just not. But I would be so much stronger if I was able to connect what I was doing with what you're great at. And if we're really honest, you'd be stronger too if you were attaching yourself to what I did. That conversation just doesn't happen. I think it's human nature. I think people just don't want to give up control.
I totally agree. I think there's another reason why in the for-purpose sector, the charity sector, people are often driven by values alignment to the organization they're working in, which often in relatively underpaid but challenging jobs. And so the solution is to work harder, get heads down, bum up, work at 100%, 120% of capacity all the time. And it doesn't give a lot of people the space to think outside, to think in alternative approaches to deliver social impact, to look at what their neighbours or the aligned organisations might be doing, and foster conversations that may or may not go anywhere because you don't have the time, because you're in a time deficit already, because you're working harder and harder. Is there any solution to that from what you've seen either in business or for-purpose work?
See, I just listening to you, I think the challenge is that the question you pose is actually not discussed properly enough at management and board level.
Yeah.
It's just not discussed, right? Yeah. Because the challenge you pose is the real challenge. What happens is we all become so insular just looking at our own world. Nobody thinks like that. And that challenge isn't discussed. And I think because that challenge isn't discussed, there's no real energy put around solving it. And the reality is it's quite solvable if we could put some focus on it, is my genuine view.
Yeah, yeah. So I sit on a board and have sat on boards in the past, and 99.9% of the discussion is an internal focus discussion.
Yeah.
So ideally, it's on strategy and governance and things that boards are supposed to do. Unfortunately, often it's on around operations because the operations are creaky at best. But rarely do boards create the space in which they can look outside of their own organizational structure about how better might we deliver on our social purpose than just us doing this on our own forever. And I think it's those boards that can do that from a a stable and strong position that actually can escalate their social impact. Those who do it from a position of desperation because we just can't survive on our own, there is limited value there. But
I think one of the things is, and just in the various charitable organizations we've worked with and spent time working, collaborating with or not. One of the things about business, and you raised it earlier, there are very clear, measurable KPIs around success.
the metric, right? Dollars is the universal.
And they're very clear. It's binary, right?
Yeah.
You, have you made money? Yes. How much did you make? And you've never made enough, and you could make more, and everything is driving around a very clear outcome. I think in a lot of charitable organizations, those outcomes are somewhat fluid and somewhat intangible, and therefore there aren't any really hard metrics that people are held to account about. And then what that does is that drives the inefficiency because nobody's really looking at trying to do enough to improve that so that that outcome can be better. And
Yeah.
a part of the problem that I've seen this is you can be a part of a charity for all the right reasons, and it doesn't mean you can't have very difficult conversations about performance. It
Yes.
happens in business as a part of doing business. It doesn't necessarily happen in the same way as a part of performance. And when you're in smaller charities, it gets clouded with the absolute focus on raising funds.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Compliance operations and particularly revenue generation. Yeah.
that's right. And so you're in that situation where, look, in business, it's binary. You know each month whether you've performed or not. In charities, sometimes it's not as clear because the measures aren't the same, or there's no real, the accountability isn't the same.
Yeah. Brilliant. I've got two more questions for you.
Sure.
The first is about speed. So businesses, this is very binary, but businesses move fast, charities move slow. What is the connection between speed and building successful partnerships in your view?
I've got this lovely thing which I call the top 10 tips for a startup, and I'll find it. It's around somewhere. But one of my tips is do not work at organizations that do not work at the same pace as you. Because you can only move you can only move as fast as the last person, right?
Yeah.
And I've learned that the hard way, and I've learned it in both charity in the not-for-profit area and business. When you're small and you're agile and you're moving fast, if you then work with a large enterprise that makes decisions in 6 to 9 months. We have 2 development cycles. We do it twice a year. It's June and you've met us in July. So you can't work in that organization, right?
Yeah.
I've been in so many meetings in my life where somebody is across the table saying to me, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. And, we might probably look at that in 2 quarters. And in my mind, I'm going, this is a complete waste of my time. I
Yeah.
need to keep going.
Yeah.
Charities are the same.
Yeah.
Right. And grant applications can take forever. You are working with larger charities that are slow and they've got a whole process to engage with them. Engaging with public sector can be a nightmare. And so I say that what I say is we're a smaller charity. We should be working with people who can make decisions faster, and they tend to be smaller. And you might have to do that for a while until you get to a point where that level of speed isn't as required, or the projects you're doing are larger and you can lay those out. So I have a firm belief that you do not engage with people who don't work at the same pace as you.
Yeah. Love it. Great. David, what's one question that every charity leader should ask themselves about collaboration this year?
I think the question you should ask yourself is, do you accept the premise that collaboration is a good thing? And if so, are you ready to be a collaborator in yourself? Right? If your premise on the first one is no, you're the wrong person in your role. I mean that. If you believe collaboration is a bad thing, you shouldn't be in your role. And if you do believe it is a good thing, are you prepared to change in your role to make it achievable within your organization? I genuinely believe that. Anyone who thinks collaboration in the world we're living in right now is not good, is shouldn't be in the role they're in.
100%. Totally agree. What a great note to finish on.